Hello and welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to utilize a provisioner to configure the VS Code on our local terminal to be able to SSH into our remote VM. Now, a provisioner is not something you want to use for every deployment. Unlike other resources, a provisioner's success or failure will not be recorded or managed by state. So if something goes wrong, that's just too bad. There is no rollback or any other way to manage it other than just running it again. While this is not great for configuring remote instances, it's perfectly fine for something like this, just adding information to a config file on our local terminal. This is a lightweight operation that doesn't affect the overall success of the deployment if something were to go wrong. So generally speaking, if you need something simple to do, use a provisioner. If you are configuring a remote instance, it's usually best to either use user data, custom data, or another type of application such as Ansible. But anyway, let's get started. So let's take a look over here. First up, we've got our provisioners. And as you can see here, as I was hinting at, provisioners are a last resort. Now, if you scroll down, you can see there's a lot of stuff that you can do other than provisioners, and one of those is what we did, custom data. But if you keep scrolling down, there's actually a lot of great information about using provisioners. And one of the most important things here is the usage of self. Within a provisioner, you can just specify self, and that will extract whatever attribute you need from what you're deploying. So if you need a private IP or a public IP, you just specify self, which simplifies the code. And then, of course, you've also got creation time provisioners, which is the default. And then you've got destroy time provisioners as well. Destroy time provisioners will perform an action whenever you destroy the script. So just keep that in mind. Definitely read over this, as provisioners can be very useful as long as you use them sparingly and with caution. So let's go ahead and set up that provisioner. Now that provisioner is going to be set up within the Azure RM Linux virtual machine block. So let's just head down here above the tags. I just like having the tags last for some reason. You specify provisioner, and then you need to specify the type of provisioner, and you have local exec and remote exec. Again, remote exec I would use very sparingly. Better to use user data or to use Ansible or some other better tool. But this is a local exec provisioner, which means it'll be running locally. And again, lightweight, doesn't cause any disaster if something goes wrong with this provisioner. So then what we need to do is provide a command. So let's go ahead and provide that command. That command is actually going to be one of these scripts. And to specify one of these scripts and pass in the variables, we're going to use what's called a template file function. So if you check out the template file function here, you specify template file just like you did the file function, pass in the path to the file, and then you pass in the variables. So there's a lot of good stuff here that kind of dives into that. Let's go ahead and see how that's going to look for our deployment. So we're going to use the template file function, just like so. And then we need to pass in, for me, the windows-ssh-script.tpl. And then I need to pass in the variables. And that's going to be in a block of curly braces. So what we want to pass in is the host name, and that's going to be self.public_IP_address, which is how you access the public IP address of this instance within state. So we take a look at the Terraform TF state, and as you can see here, public_IP_address. So that's what we want. So self.public_IP_address is going to give us that. And then the user is going to be admin user, just like so in quotes. We then need to pass in our identity file. And that is going to be located in that home directory, SSH, / in my case, MTC Azure key. And of course, that is our private key, so do keep that in mind. And then after that, what we need to do is specify an interpreter. So what the interpreter is doing is basically dictating whether we're using PowerShell or Bash or whatever shell we're using to run this script. And in our case, we're using PowerShell if you're using Windows. So for me, it will be PowerShell and then comma dash command, all in quotes. Now, if you're using Linux or a Mac, your interpreter will be bash, comma, dash C, just like so. So this is your interpreter if you were using Linux or Mac. But I'm going to delete that from mine. All right, that should be everything. Let me take a look at my script here. Hostname, user identity file. Hostname, user identity file, all have been defined. So everything looks good there. So now let's see if this works. So what I want to do, and remember, everything right now has been deployed. If you want the same result I get, which is going to hit a little snag, go ahead and deploy before you do this. Otherwise, just watch and you'll see how I handle it. All right, and before we go further, as you can see, I've actually made a couple of typos, unfortunately. This keyboard seems to be failing on me. So I've gone ahead and corrected those. Let's go ahead and run a Terraform plan and see if I missed anything else. All right, so here is the snag I anticipated. As you can see, no changes. But we made a pretty big change. That's a lot of typing in our resource here. A provisioner does not get picked up by the state, remember? So it doesn't know that anything has changed. So what we need to do is we need to get rid of this instance. We need to destroy it and reapply it. And there are a lot of ways to do that, but the best way to do it is just to replace it. This used to be called tainting a resource, and I guess HashiCorp didn't like that word, so they've changed it to the replace flag. So let's go ahead and utilize that. So first, Terraform state list. Let's go ahead and copy our MTC VM right there. And then run a Terraform apply dash replace. And then paste in that resource. All right, so as you can see, using that replace flag replaces our virtual machine, which will then run our provisioner. So let's go ahead and say yes to this. All right, so we have an apply complete. Let's go ahead and see if this worked. So I'm going to head up to View, Command Palette, and I'm going to select Remote SSH Connect to Host. Of course, if you don't have that, go ahead and start typing Remote SSH. And if we scroll down here, 20.121.205.65, let's see if that is it. So I clicked on it. We're going to select Linux. I would like to continue. This is a very good sign. All right, we're logged into something, MTC VM. Now I've only spun up one VM, so this has got to be it. Let's Docker version. Does not appear to have been installed yet. So we'll give it a little bit of time and then we will see. All right, it took a little bit of time, but guess what? Docker is now installed. Everything is working perfectly, and we now have an awesome little remote terminal directly to our instance so we can start developing. All right, so go ahead and mark this lesson complete. Come on back to the next one and let's continue the course.